Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today. I am your host, Steve Carmichael, and you are listening to episode 74 of the RunBuzz podcast. And today's episode is going to be a little bit different because depending on how you're listening, you will be either listening through the podcast in audio format, or you will be seeing us on the video, which, to be honest, is a little nerve-wracking for me because I have the face for audio. And but if regardless how you're listening, thanks for tuning in. My guest is Nastasya Rose, and she's the founder of Mvur.
Yeah.
How do I say that? Mvur. I always mess that up. Sorry. A holistic health coaching company that focuses on total body health, such as mind, body, and soul. She's a certified fitness trainer. She's board certified health coach, and she's a specialist when it comes to peak performance. She's a specialist as it applies towards working towards having a performance mindset, getting rid of bad habits, and just taking on the challenges of day-to-day life. In addition, she's building this incredible business, the one that I just totally hacked up on the name, despite practicing that, actually. She's a rockin' mom. She also is working on her PhD in performance psychology. So first of all, Nastasya, I want to welcome you to the RunBuzz podcast.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm very honored to be here.
Well, I'm glad to have you. I know we've known each other a short time, and just the energy and what you're doing with your community on Facebook and that I'm also a member of. I just said, I got to get you on the show. And so we had that little chat. I don't know you very, very well, but we're going to learn more about you today. So anyways, I gave a brief introduction of who you are and what you do, but I think what I want to do is get into, before we get into the main topic, is really just talk about your story. You know, you didn't just wake up one morning with this knowledge. You know, you started somewhere. You had gifts and talents, but you certainly had to develop them somewhere. And so can you spend a minute or two, just walk us through your story? Because I bet, like many of us, you've had challenges and setbacks. And I think if we hear the story, it'll help us relate to you as well as today's topic, because I think not only do you overcome these challenges, but you really launched from those challenges. Am I right?
Yes, definitely. So, well, we all have pivotal points, right? Real powerful pivotal points when it comes to our career. But I think for me, it really started in my childhood. I became passionate about being the best possible version of myself because of what I dealt with my mom. My mom had taken me to a psychiatrist's office once because she thought that there was something wrong with me. And it's probably the weirdest session I've ever had because I was very young. I was 14, and it went from us going to see what was wrong with me to the psychiatrist actually shifting the tunnel vision from me to my mother. And before we knew it, we found out that she was diagnosed bipolar. So I still remember that day. She ran out of that room faster than we could say when, went to the supermarket, and was just screaming in Spanish, cursing out about the psychiatrist, saying that he was the crazy one for giving her this type of diagnosis. But the symptoms were there and they didn't lie. So, there was a lot of psychological abuse. There was a lot of physical abuse in the house, and I just didn't have an outlet. And one day she was working. She was actually a paralegal for CBS, so you would have never seen it coming if you knew her from outside of the home. And I came across her firm DVDs on strength training, and once I was coming home from high school, that was my release. And I would sneak to do the videos with the barbell and all, and the stairmaster, and the whole stair thing right there, and everything before she came home. And that was my release. That was where I was able to become, the better version of myself. And for a second, I could just forget all of the things that were happening at home. So I started to become passionate about creating that outlet for people. And that's how Mvur came about. It wasn't Mvur 7 years ago. It was No Feel Live. And then it went to the Fun Vegan once I went vegan, and then Bods Are Us, and now it's Mvur. So, Mvur is what stuck. It stands for Asserting Action with Vision. And we are really passionate about creating that outlet for people where they could not only heal from their pain, but also be able to perfect their craft and be at the best peak performance possible. And the number one thing that has gotten me by all of this is positivity. So that's the number one thing that I'm great at teaching, is positivity, motivation, how to be consistent with it so that no matter what happens, you are always at your high performance level in order to do what you need to do with your life purpose. So that's how we're here.
Well, thanks for sharing that story. We're going to dig into a little bit more about your company later in the podcast, but I want to start off with, you brought up peak performance, and we're certainly going to talk about positivity and a couple of the other ones. But can we start maybe by, when I think of peak performance as a runner, I think of peak performance is my race time, as my pace, as something that is a outwardly physical, it's tied to, it's a thing tied to a clock for most of us. It's for getting faster. Maybe it's accomplishing a certain distance that we couldn't do before, but it's broader than that. I feel it's, I'm going beyond running just in my own coaching programs, is that when I realized that most running coaches are focusing on the running aspects, for me, what I was seeing the most successful runners do was fix areas or focus on areas that had nothing to do with running. For example, mindset, positivity, getting rid of those negative thoughts, which I call thought monkeys. Thought monkeys are those little things that get between our ears and tell us we can't do something. But it's also nutrition. It's strength and other things. It's as far as, whether that's weight training or cross training. So peak performance is a very broad definition, but I probably gave a lot of it away. But can you give me your definition of what peak performance means to you, and a little bit about how do we go about defining what that is?
Yes, definitely. Well, you nailed it, right? So peak performance, when we really look into it, yes, nutrition is important. Yes, strength training is important. All those things are imperative in order to really cause a powerful effect to be at peak performance. But it's really, in my words, in my version of it, a way of just beating those obstacles, right? So, for example, let's say you're getting ready to do a race and you are pumped, you're ready to go, and just seconds before, the buzzer goes off and you're ready to go, all of a sudden you get these crazy fears that just skyrocket out of nowhere. Like, am I ready? Can I even do this? Oh my goodness, is my posture correct? Like, all these crazy stories and an adrenaline rush, and it feels like it's almost like 200 miles an hour and more. And when you're at your peak performance, you're able to just be past that, stay in the zone. Maybe you weren't even in the zone, and that's why those thoughts came in the first place. So you're getting in there and you're staying put and you're saying, I am ready, I can do this. And you're using the adrenaline instead as your power rather than your fear. You've just got to have that, you get that little brief interval that you can really shift it. And if you miss it, then it's going to be too tough, and then you might lose, right? Because you're not at peak performance. But you have that moment where you can just shift it. And when you shift that moment, that interval that just randomly pops up out of nowhere because of all of the adrenaline and all the emotions that's happening, then you can go in at peak performance and deliver what you wanted to deliver before that moment. So that's really what peak performance is. It's like episodes. You get to, you're ready, you prepared, you did all this, and then just that interval. When you beat past that interval, there is your peak performance.
So I think the analogy that you gave with right before a race is, to this day, no matter how prepared I am, I'll get onto the starting line and I always have those nerves, that adrenaline that starts flowing, that some of us, it comes out very positively, and in other people it can turn to negative self-talk and, did I train enough? We in the running world, when we taper before a race, when we cut back on our mileage right before we get raced, so we get all rested up physically, it's some of the toughest times we have as runners, because if we start thinking about all the things that we didn't do, or we did do, or was it enough, right? And so I certainly think from a peak performance and this idea of being in the zone, and one of the things that I get coach runners to do is that visualization, putting yourself in those positions to think about how you're, understand that those are going to be normal thoughts, and that you can deflect them a lot of times by just practicing. It's very much a practice I think, to get into that kind of mental state, that zone. And there's aspects of it. There's aspects of when we call in the zone, there's the aspect, right, of you think of a professional football player when they're going to go make that, touchdown on the last play of the game with 2 seconds left, or the basketball player that's got to make the free throw. They have the ability to tune everything out around them to get all those negative thoughts, right? They go back to, this state where they feel like everything slows down for them. And, but peak performance for me is, like I said, I think you nailed it with this idea that everything's clicking on all cylinders.
Yeah.
And I think it takes practice to get there. You certainly have to do the prep work, but also peak performance can have for a secondary meaning in a sense that all the things that we do to get there it's more than just the competition. The competition of running a race or playing in that high level football game to me seems just a small part of the equation. Like if I want to get in peak performance, I have to eat better. I have to sleep better. I have to do all the lifestyle things. I got to start cutting out the bad habits of staying up and watching the Tonight Show until 1 o'clock in the morning, or sleeping in and not getting my butt out of bed in the morning, right? So those are things that I think become, we're so multifaceted as human beings. There's so many things that can derail us that we have to be clicking, I think, on all cylinders. That doesn't mean we have to be perfect, I think, but we have to be able to make small improvements across the board. And so I guess that comes to my next question is, when we're in that training phase, or we're in that phase where we're trying to improve ourselves in a number of different areas, how do we know where to start? Like, what is our first, like, how do we prioritize that? Because for me, if I try to do everything at once, I become just this hot damn mess of confusion, and I get overwhelmed by everything and I do nothing.
Yeah. Well, I love that you said small improvements, because that is your answer. That's how you start. Everyone thinks that you've got to just jump right into it and you just got to go hard till you almost pass out. And that's actually the worst thing you can do. You cannot start that way, because you have to accept, that if you're aiming for a new goal, you've got to do different things. So you have to actually be an analysis of your body first. You can't be an analysis of your body if you're going all in. There's too many compartments that is happening at the same time. You're not really able to be in full analysis. You have to actually be in full analysis when you start. So you have to do small improvements. You have to do small things in order to study your different mechanics of your body and see where you're at, where you're weak, where you're strong, so that you can know where to improve. That's really where it begins. Like for you do running. For us, we work with a lot of like weight loss clients and stuff like that. But I always tell them, don't rush it. Don't rush it. You will save yourself so much heartache if you just start small and build up, because then you're going to get motivated and you're going to say, well, okay, I got through this. What if we add this? Or I got through a 20-minute workout. What if we increased it and did a 30-minute workout today? And it's just, when you really see that, you get to see, oh, this is what I did wrong years ago, and this is how I can improve it now, because I'm starting slow. I'm actually taking the time to watch. It's just like when you have a conversation with somebody. All these people in this world talk about, listening to one another, but they don't really do it, because when it's time for them to listen to you, they're not hearing you. They have their own agenda. But if they were to actually sit down and hear you, and to actually sit down and listen, then they would know what to do with you. That's how you have to treat your body. You have to start with small improvements. Your body's actually trying to tell you something. And if you don't listen to it, then you're not going to see how to be at your best peak performance. You've got to listen to what your body's trying to tell you. You have to be in full intuition when you begin to train. It's not, oh, let me just do everything now and then figure out how my body feels after. No, there's a language there. So you start small, you see what's happening with each movement on each small step, and then you could get to the next level and say, okay, I think I'm ready to handle this. Let's see how my body reacts to it. So there's a reason when we tell you start small. It's not that we're treating you as a baby or as a beginner. It's because we're really teaching you how to be intuitive with your body mechanics. So that's how you start. You start just like when you begin with a trainer, assessment. You know, that's why there's an assessment, so that you can see what your body can handle. So that's really how you do it. Instead of just trying to run in, it doesn't matter how well you've trained. It doesn't, your whole life. You're starting at a new level, a new peak. So you have to take it seriously in order to see what your body can do. Small improvements.
So with what you describe as having your body has this language, are you referring to really just self-awareness? Is that what you're kind of bringing out? Is that you're going to get feedback from your body, both physical, because you're not ready to do, a marathon yet, right? Or even a 5K yet. So your body's telling you, but also I think it's self-awareness of, would it also be your thoughts? So here's the reason why I'm going this way is one of the most common things that I hear from runners is that I know I can run further than I do, but I give up. I'm talking myself out of what I'm capable of. Now, we certainly don't want people pushing, where they're not ready for something.
Right.
But when it comes from a peak performance perspective, how do we deal with those thoughts? Because it's one thing to be self-aware. It's also one thing to be self-aware that I have these negative thoughts that are constantly telling me I'm not good enough, or I have fear, or I have, I'm afraid of being uncomfortable. One of the very most common things with runners, here is running can sometimes suck, and it can suck even when you're having a good day, because it's not an easy task to do. But how do we get past those thoughts? How do we start changing ourselves and saying, I want to make these, I know I need to make small incremental changes. We all know we need to make small incremental changes. But how do I get past that first step of making that change?
Right. I love that question. You have to remember, if there wasn't such thing as you being enough, then you wouldn't be motivated when you hear motivational speakers. They're doing something to you when they're talking to you. They're actually waking up the positive side of you that isn't being used at its full functionality. So if it wasn't true of you being enough and more, then it wouldn't inspire you. You would just be like, no, that doesn't matter. Like, I'm done. There's a reason why it's a very profitable field. It has a lot to deal with you being enough and more. So, for example, let's say you're getting ready to do a new race and you have these negative thoughts that come into your mind saying that you're not enough, saying that just crazy doubt, crazy negativity. That is your interval shift where you have to say, but you are, but I am, because look at how far you've come. And then you've also got to tell yourself, this is deja vu from all the times that I've said that I could not do it. Where has it gotten me? I'm still here, right? I'm still here. So what if I just fought against that for a second? What if I just did the opposite of what I've been telling myself the past 5, 10, 15 years? And I'll probably cry while I do it because I'll be so terrified. But what if I got past that? There's an arrow exercise. It's done with T. Harv Ekker's Millionaire Mindset course when you go to the workshop. And they put an arrow right here at your throat. And I was terrified when I did this. And you put it right here. You have to actually walk forward with no hands and break the arrow with your throat. And I was like, and I have the trainer, the speaker of the whole event saying, oh, if it goes right through your throat, we're going to have to take you to the hospital. But I have to tell you this right now because of, medical advisory. And I'm like, well, this is freaking awesome. Okay. So I just have it right on my neck. But I was like, you know what? Let me be the first one to do it in the circle because we're split up in circles. I walked forward and broke it. And the biggest breakthrough that I got from breaking that arrow is that nothing is what it seems on the surface. Nothing. So all those times of you telling yourself that I'm doubting myself, I'm not good enough, all these things, It is not the truth. It's false evidence appearing real. It's fear. And if you just get through that, and what gets you through that is by actually seeing the truth that you told yourself this before. You've said this before to yourself, and it's gotten you where? Nowhere. You're still there. So it's time to just move on. And the second that you come to that realization, which obviously doesn't happen overnight, or else we wouldn't have beautiful podcasts like this to motivate us, right? But when that moment comes that finally you break through, you're just like, wow, like I was enough the whole time, and I didn't even know. So you got to move forward even when you don't believe it. And the day's going to come that as you're repeatedly telling yourself, I am enough, it's all in affirmations, what you tell your mind. It all starts with your mind. And as you keep continuing, it will eventually transform. It's the truth.
So I thought you hit on several points that I think were outstanding, and I'm going to try to remember them all.
Thank you.
It stops getting old because you start forgetting things. But anyways, you're young, you don't have this problem yet. So one of the things when you talk about your interval shift and having that thought, and it reminded me of a book I read, and I can't remember the author's name, and I will certainly put that in the show notes. But I think the book was titled 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And our decisions are decided in less than 5 seconds, or if it's not the decision, it's the inflection point or the deflection point where we decide not to do something. So if you can do something, count backwards from 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and if you can put yourself into some sort of action, then you're statistically almost 100% that you're going to complete that action. So cold morning, it's wintertime, you don't want to get up and work out. Alarm goes off, you got 5 seconds to get your butt out of bed and get moving, because the odds of once you get moving, you're going to continue the action. So that, I think, the same thing when that thought comes in your head is that you have that, if you have that moment of self-doubt, you got 5 seconds or less to reflect and deflect. I call that deflecting the thought monkeys. I just, push them away. It's like the devil on one shoulder and the angel on one, and they're both talking in your ear. You have to get rid of one of them super fast. So that I thought that was an interesting point that you made with making that decision to do it quick. The second thing is to push past fear, push past uncomfortable. I think you have to push your limits, which you just brought up. You have to not necessarily push your limits all the way. I think you just have to get that next step. So just slightly get a little more uncomfortable or slightly impact that fear. And if you do that regularly enough, it becomes like no big deal, because we kind of continue to challenge ourselves. Just like when we lift weights, we start off with 5 pounds and we get to the point where until 5 pounds isn't a challenge, and then we bump it up to 10, and all of a sudden 10 pounds is like, oh my God, this is killing me. So, but you keep doing it, and eventually it becomes easy. And I think the same thing is it's a bunch of these micro decisions and micro steps that I think get us from point A to point B, regardless of whether that's running or whether that's dieting or whether that's health or anything. But I think you nailed that, because that's what I see over and over again, is that when I personally fail, it's because I'm thinking so far out in advance. I'm thinking out, one of these days I want to run a 100-mile race. And then in my head, I do anyways. But then I realize that I'm not ready to do that. I'm barely right now ready to do a half marathon. So it's going to take a lot of steps to get to that point. Now, I'll probably never run a 100-mile race because it's one of those things where I want to do it, but I like being comfortable too. Which brings me to my next question. Complacency. So I think, in my experience, I see across the population in general, and certainly I'm included in this, and I'm sure we all are at times, is we find ourselves happy with where we're at. We're settled. I mean, we have an okay relationship, we have an okay job, we have an okay, our health's okay. It may not be great, but it's okay. It's, we're not dying tomorrow. We're not going to lose our job tomorrow. We have okay friends. But I saw something pop up today on my Facebook feed a friend of mine has a daughter named Summer Silvery, and she does these little short YouTube videos each morning at 6 o'clock in the morning, and they're just little 30-second long things. And I was watching one, and we say our young people are lazy. I mean, this girl and people like you, I mean, you guys are doing some amazing things. The thing that came about her is that I'm not happy with just settling. And I think we all deep down have this feeling that we want more, but we're okay with settling. And I just want to get your perspective of, do you think it's okay to be, just happy where we're at? I know we have to be happy with who we are. Or do you think that if we really want to live a life of following our dreams, our passions, our goals, that we have to break that complacency?
I was watching an episode. It was the latest one from Marie Forleo. She's like the OG of coaching, and she did an interview recently with Brendan Burchard. And I'm growing fond of this guy because I study peak performance, but they mentioned being satisfied with not settling, and I think that's really a great combo for a new angle. For example, in my relationship, I used to think that I was settling because I was always complaining about the things that were going wrong in my relationship. I don't think it was necessarily the 3-year milestone that had me wake up to be grateful. I think it was more of the wisdom gained in that time. You have to understand that instead of blaming the other person or blaming the other environment or blaming anything else but yourself, you have to really see what you want. And you have to understand that you're never going to be satisfied when it comes to where to settle. So if you get satisfied with never settling, then that's definitely a more positive, joyous angle to look at it, because then you'll never get bored. It actually transforms from you thinking you're settling in the life that you're in to accepting that you're never going to have enough, and be satisfied with never settling and always reach for more with the environment you have. And that's definitely different. Everybody thinks, oh, I could have such a better relationship, I could have such a better life, I could just grow out of it. What if you just grew with the people you have that love you? What if you didn't just care about yourself, you cared to grow with them? And then, of course, if they don't want to grow with you, that's a different story. But that was how things transformed in my environment. I no longer complained about what I was in. I desired to grow with the environment I had, and then everything changed. I remember when my home, I used to just wake up and I used to just see just darkness. And now I wake up and every day is a beautiful day. So the key is really to be satisfied with never settling, except that you're never going to want to settle, except that you're never going to want to just deal with what you have, and be on that journey with what you have to keep rising up for more. Doesn't necessarily mean material. I would prefer that it would mean what difference you're making in the world. Like this interview, I didn't have to be dollied up. Most interviews I am, and then other interviews I dress down, and everything else just looks nice. What matters more is the difference, the impact, the influence that you can make onto things. You should never settle for that, but be satisfied that you're not settling. So that's really what turns the angle in complacency. We have this illusion that society gives us that's just like, oh, you just need to have fancy things. You just need to have great things. No, what about how much greater is your influence this year? How much greater are you inspiring people to change? That is where the fortune lies, and then eventually that'll show everywhere else. But you don't need to worry about that. What you need to worry about is, where are you never settling on your life purpose? People focus on the wrong things with complacency. They put it more on material rather than on why they were created to be on this planet. So if you actually focus on why you're here on this planet as a being, then you'll no longer feel complacent. All of a sudden, you'll wake up every morning being excited because now you have something to live for. And now there's value in everything all of a sudden. Because it's like you're not just dealing with what you have anymore. You're actually alive because you're focusing on what's important. So to really heal that complacency issue, you've got to be satisfied with never settling and accept that and let that be your adrenaline that gets you through life.
And I want to just wrap that back around to the peak performance. And so one of the things I think we have to understand is that it's a never, you mentioned it. It's a never, it's not like it's a stake in the ground.
Right.
Because you're always going to be able to improve. You're always going to be able to do things and when you get there, it's almost depressive because you can look back and say, yeah, I got this far, but there's also a point. It's like, oh my God, I got here. Now I got to go this next thing. But one of my best friends, which I think I mentioned to you in the pre-interview, PJ Dixon, great mentor. He was a guest on the show. He's not a runner. He's been in a wheelchair his entire life, but he framed it like, you got to stop saying, I got to go running or I got to go do a workout. You got to start reframing it as, I get to go do this. I get to do that. I think our language and the internal dialogue that we're having in our head is far more important in the outcome of that particular run or that particular workout. Because if you get that right, you're going to have a great workout no matter what. And I think, how you brought that together, I think kind of wraps up what I wanted to talk from a peak performance perspective. And that is, I think we have to get in this cycle of self-improvement.
Yeah.
And I think it's not that we have to go read the latest guru or go see the latest thing. I think we just have to go, here's where I'm at today. Here's where I want to go. And these are the steps to get there. And I'm not going to get there overnight. I need to be patient, like you mentioned. And I just need to be self-aware that this is a process. And I think we have to enjoy that process. There's going to be times where that process is not enjoyable, but that's where it's breaking through our comfort level. And I think that's what breaks the cycle of complacency, is that if everything was easy, there would be no reward in the journey. And I think you talk to a marathon runner, anybody who's run a marathon, it's brutal training. It's brutal running the marathon, but it is so damn worth it. And it's life-changing. And that can be a 5K. It doesn't have to be a marathon. I remember the first time I ran a first race. It was life-changing. To be sitting here about now, several years later, and thinking that I would be talking about running on a podcast, that I would be coaching people in running, is just ludicrous. You asked me 10 years ago, I'm like, this is the dumbest thing ever. Like, why would I do this? So you never know where life's going to take you. I think you just have to kind of ride it out and just follow that inner dialogue. And so I think that's really what I wanted to kind of to wrap up from a peak performance perspective, is that it's not a race time. It's not a particular single event, that it's a combination of events. And I think you hit on all those so eloquently. So first of all, I want to say thank you for that. Now I just want to switch to a couple last things, and then we'll kind of start wrapping up. One is for somebody who says, yeah, well, this is great. And I got this, I got this idea of what peak performance is, and I want to start making changes in my life. What's the first step they take?
If they want to be at their peak performance, like what should get them?
I not necessarily be at it, but what's the first step I take? What's my next step? I've heard you guys sit here, me and you being us guys. I'm putting it in their third party voice, which is not done very well. But I'm like, I hear you guys talking, right? And you're talking about this, and I'm like, this all sounds great, and but I'm stuck. I don't know where to start. What's the first step?
First step is to relax. That's the first step. First step is to be relaxed. That's the first step. We think that we have to be the best possible version of something, or we have to get back to what we defined as our peak performance. I'll give my heart, for example. When I was getting back into training, because I couldn't work out for women that have their children, it's supposed to be just the first 2 months. For me, I couldn't move the way that I would want to move for almost the first year. And I'm still battling that because I know my fitness level that I had before my son. But when you get a diagnosis like congestive heart failure, it's a very serious thing. There's a lot of things that you cannot do the way that you used to. And my heart will probably never be at the same again. Doctors are still trying to figure out how to fix me. So it's very challenging, and you really have to be an advocate for putting your health first so that you can stay alive for those that you love. But where I really had to start it was even simpler than I'm going to start one workout this week. It was saying I get to breathe. I'm grateful that I get to breathe. And it would start with me just walking down the steps, getting into my car, and just sitting down and being grateful that I could sit down and breathe at a great pace. And that was really how it started. Once you could deal with that and you can actually drive for up to 30 minutes without hyperventilation, then you could get to the next phase. So it's like you have to be in a really calm state. And then you've just got to release whatever is stressing you out. And once that's out of your body, which is why meditation is so great, then you bring that intent into your body. And then you tell yourself, okay, this is what I'm going to do. And that's how you get in the zone. That's how you get in the zone. You release all these feelings, everything you feel, everything. You just blow it out. And then you put in the intent, and now the intent can actually resonate within your core because you just took out anything that would have held it back. So you really just got to relax, be at a peaceful place, and just take everything out, and then finally put that intention in there, say what you are intending to do, and then make it so.
I think my mind is blown because I think you nailed the answer that I wasn't expecting. But it's so damn simple. And I think, and that's relax, because take a pause, figure out where you're at, and go from there. Because I do 1,000 things at once, and I'm overwhelmed all the time. And so that's why I was a little caught off guard. I was like, that wasn't my first step. My first step would be like, okay, what are my priorities? What do I want to do?
Yeah.
In that order. How am I gonna fit that into my Google Calendar? I can't, so what am I going to toss? So I can prioritize this. But it is that simple in a sense that we make it harder than it has to be because we're emotional, overwhelmed beings, and we are just conditioned in this modern world of doing either 1,000 things at once. Runners specifically are well known for being type A personalities. I'm not saying all are. Don't send the hate mail yet. But it is something we all deal with. And we certainly, especially anybody who puts themselves into any kind of sport where there's a certain degree of uncomfortableness. I think sometimes we can fall into that trap that the rest of our life needs to be that. And, but anyways, I think you nailed it. I want to end on that because that was beautiful. Everybody just relax. It'll be okay. Just figure out your next step.
I have to add, you're going to fail when you try this for the first time. So you can't beat yourself up on it because that's what happened with me. And that's what's happened with a lot of my clients. We'll start and we'll be like, oh, okay. So it'd be simple. It's not simple for us though when we start because we're so used to just being on the go and seeing what we fit in our calendar and seeing what goes in our to-do list and in our morning routine and in our afternoon routine. And we think we got to be like Speedy Gonzalez all the time. When really we got to get back to basics and allow ourselves to be a beginner. And we don't know how to do that because what we're used to doing the whole past 10, 15, 20, 25 plus years.
Or longer.
You gotta get back to like what it was when you were a child. Why is it so simple for children to love life? And it's because they don't do all that. You don't see them walking around with planners and stuff like that. I mean, unfortunately, unfortunately, you may see a lot with tablets today, but, you know, they have the opportunity where they get to paint, they get to be outside, they get to do things that are simple. And you got to get back to that. You got to get back to simple, the way it was when you were a kid. And you want to get back to that anyway, because that's when your dream first became alive. So the second that you get back to that era, then you can remember why you're even doing what you're doing in the first place. It all starts from your childhood. So, you know, you gotta also accept that when you do start this, you're gonna fail miserably. Like, I remember the first time I ever tried it, and my boyfriend Vic was like, how are you doing? I was like, no, I failed miserably today. Like, I don't know how to just sit down and do nothing. You know, like, it didn't make sense to me. So, you know, you'll know in your body when everything is released, because it'll take practice. Just as much as it takes you to practice a marathon, it's going to take you practice to release whatever white space needs to be created so that you can really go after your intention. So I just had to add that for anybody that tries it, that hears it and is like, oh, okay, let me try that. You're going to fail because you don't know how to have it be that simple. But I promise you, if you keep going, the day will come where you're like, wow, this is what it feels like to release and create that intention and execute. So I
agree. And if anybody doesn't know what you're talking about, the easiest way to test this is to try to just keep a quiet mind and meditate for a minute or so. I bet most people can't get through 5 or 10 seconds without something popping into their head.
Yeah.
I have so much head noise going on in my head that I couldn't stick with it because I didn't have the patience to do it. But I also think that when we're out on a run, or we're out doing something that we enjoy, or we're in that right state, when we get into that true zone, miles go by and we don't even remember them. I remember being out frequently on the running trail and getting point A to point B and not really understanding or being able to remember because my mind was clear. I wasn't thinking about anything. I was just in the moment. So I won't go down that's a whole other topic for another time, but you're so dead on that. I think to get into that relaxed state, it is practice, because we're just not conditioned to do it. We don't do it enough.
Yeah.
Some people do it because they practice it. That's why they call meditation a practice and not anything else, because it is that. Anyways, I want to thank you on the show, but real quick for coming on the show. But real quick, I know people are going to be interested in following you. I think it's a wonderful thing. I'm glad we got to connect, and I'm glad I'm part of your Facebook community. And I want to give you a chance to really talk about how people can best come to you, to best get more information about you, to figure out, if they're interested in more information and the stuff that we've talked about, how they can reach out to you.
Awesome. Well, we have, different platforms, but the best way they could probably get a hold of us is from joining our private Facebook group. We have a really great Facebook group that we started this year, and we exceeded the expectations and goals that we had set for the group. It's called The Community, and it's a really powerful group. It's facebook.com/groups/Envure. And the name of the group is The Community. It is a really great community where people are coming in with all types of creative talents, and fitness trainers, and athletes, and putting motivational quotes in there every day. There's also poets, singers, artists, writers, all types of great, beautiful people. And it's just a place where you get to practice perfecting your craft. And then for runners, they would be able to perfect their mindset in order to get ready for that run. So, our group is where you would go for more of the mindset set of things. And then, guys, the one that's running this podcast, he has a great group himself. And, it's private groups are really a great way to connect. It's really a great way to build. It's a great way to really make a difference. So probably the best way that you could get a hold of us is in that group, The Community. It's where we spend a lot of our time. We have thousands of people in there now, thousands of Envure members that are really just excited now about their life purpose. They didn't know if they could do it before, and now they're just getting that motivation to do whatever they want to do from just being in that group. So if it's anywhere where you can find us, it's in our private Facebook group, The Community.
I'll have the links to that in the show notes, which the show notes you can get at runbuzz.com/74. That's runbuzz.com/74. So I'll have the links to your social media links, your website. I won't give out your email address. I'm sure, nobody wants to start, you don't want to get all the spam messages, but certainly they can get in touch with you because you are active in the community each and every day. It's a great community. It's different out of all the other communities. And I'm not just saying this. I'm saying this because it's true, is that your community is different than any other community out there. So that our community, we focus on supporting each other as runners and asking questions of runners, and it's great and everything. You have such a wide range of people, but it's so supportive in a way that groups typically aren't, because I think people bring a lot of different perspectives. It is a place where people can go work through stuff. I've heard you sing. You're an amazing singer. But I've heard, there was a gentleman in the other day that had, who lost something like over 100 and some pounds of weight loss. And it's a very safe, I felt very safe. Not that I get scared when I go to Facebook groups, but it's a very safe environment for people to share and work things and stuff. And it's active in that sense. And I think that's what's really special about it. Whereas most groups, you're just going out there and you're making connections and you're having dialogue, but you don't see the practice piece of it, which I think is what makes your group special. So keep up doing what you're doing. Thank you. For those listening, thanks for trying out our science fair project with the video. If you're listening to the podcast, I'm sure we'll have a link to the video so you can see me. I'm really uncomfortable on video, so that's one of the things I'll be practicing in this group because it's just not something that comes natural to me. I'm used to being behind a mic and I got a lot of buttons to push, but nobody has to see me do it. So I appreciate your community for that. And I want to thank you very much for coming on the show today and sharing your story and all the different things you're doing. So keep up the good work. Pretty amazed and jealous at how fast you've been able to. This thing is a movement. It's not even it's kind of this grassroots thing that's kind of taken off. And I know there's years behind it because it's not like an overnight success. Nothing is. Yeah. But it's certainly good to see the growth just in the short few weeks that I've been a part of the community. So I want to again thank you for coming on.
Thank you. It's such an honor to hear from you. We definitely put in the work, so we really do appreciate that. And we just pray that we can keep inspiring as many people as we can in order to live their life purpose. It's an honor to be on this show. We've heard, I think, about 3 good episodes now from this podcast, and it's a great podcast. Anybody that is watching this video or anybody that's listening to this episode, definitely check out what other episodes are on this show because it's just great. The mentality to really learn what it is to be in the right mindset to succeed at that marathon or just be at your best peak performance as a runner. This podcast is one that you want to have on your list. So I thank you so much. It's an honor for you bringing us on here as well.
Well, I thank you for that. And I'm trying to find the money that I used to just pay for that advertising. Anyway, I appreciate that. And thank you so much for coming on the show. And so I'll have everything in the show notes and I look forward to chatting with you soon.
Thank you. Chat with you soon. Thank you so much.
All right. Well, thank you.